Good morning and welcome to our UBC Learning Circle, Unceded and Undefeated with Alana Cook. Today's conversation is presented in partnership with the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. We like to thank the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the UBC Learning Circle and allowing us to have these conversations. Before we formally begin, I'd like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Please feel free to introduce yourselves and the nation you're calling in from in the chat box. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarain Squawkin. I'm the Learning Circle Manager. I'm Sealk Okanagan on my mother's side and Hickory, Apache, and Belgian on my father's side. I'll be your moderator for today's discussion, and joining us working behind the scenes is Cynthia, our production coordinator, and Kira, our program assistant. They'll be in the background interacting with everyone in the chat. And finally, before we get into today's discussion, I will just provide a gentle heads up that the topics covered may be sensitive or emotionally triggering. Please make sure that you're looking after yourself. And if at any point in time you need to talk to a friend, elder, counselor, or family member, don't hesitate to do so. We have some prompts in the chat for you if you need additional support. Now I'll turn it over to Alana to introduce herself.
Thanks, Sarain. Bon matin, Tanchekiawao, Alana Cook, Dishnakashon, and Fem Michif Niao. So good morning, everybody. My name is Alana Cook. I'm proudly Michif Métis on my mother's side with Soto roots and Scottish on my father's side. This is exciting to be doing this again. Online is always something I always struggle a little bit because I can't see people's reactions. So it's nice to have Sarain, so I'm not talking into the void. I did a presentation like that once and it was just very uncomfortable. So nice to have some human interaction. Ooh, a lot of people calling in from all over BC. Amazing. Well, thank you. I think without further ado, we'll get started. And this is Unceded and Undefeated. So what is this all about? An urban Michif Métis woman shares her ongoing journey as a professional athlete, exploring the connections between her culture and the martial arts. Join this matriarch-in-training, as I like to call myself, as she tells her story of connecting to culture, decolonizing her sport, and healing through a holistic perspective. This land is unceded and our people are undefeated. Next slide, please. So before we begin, land acknowledgement, right? We always have to do one. With gratitude and respect, I acknowledge that I work today as a guest on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples in St. Catharines, Ontario. And you don't have to write it in the chats, but I'm really curious if everybody here knows what unceded means. So this is something that's quite interesting because a lot of people do land acknowledgements now. They'll have them on their websites, they'll give them at talks, and it's really wonderful to see people starting to actually do that and recognize the territory. But I have to ask, do people know what unceded means? Next slide, please, Sarain. It means stolen. It literally means stolen. So when people are doing these beautiful land acknowledgements, they don't always realize that they're saying that they acknowledge that they're living, working, and playing on stolen land. And if you didn't know what it means, I'm not trying to shame you, but I want to draw attention to how performative and a bit generic a lot of land acknowledgements have become, and remind us that when people are doing them, they are literally admitting that they are living, working, and playing on land that was stolen and remains stolen from the original inhabitants. Next slide, please. And then thinking about the other words, traditional and ancestral. When we say these words, I like to think that we're acknowledging to the people here that they have, we are grateful that we get to be on their territories that they have occupied since time immemorial, time beyond memory. And unceded doesn't just mean stolen, but I always like to kind of say that to wake everyone up and get them to start realizing it. But it really means that there was no treaty signed that relinquished part of the land. This land, especially in British Columbia, has never been officially yielded or surrendered to the crown by the original inhabitants. And even the treaties that were signed out in these territories, you know, a lot of them were signed under duress. They were signed and then the agreements on part of the government were never held up. So a lot of these treaties, you have to kind of think about, like, a lot of people say all this land is unceded. All this land really is not the property of the government. All this land is still ancestral, is traditional, and it's unceded. And I want to explore the idea of ownership, owning the land versus stewardship. So when I was a teacher and I would talk a little bit about land acknowledgements, something people would say like, oh, we want to recognize the original owners of the land, the Musqueam people. And I say, like, you're on the right track, but we want to think about owning is a very colonial idea. We want to think about stewardship, reciprocity. We take care of the land and the land is taking care of us. It's a reciprocal, oh, little heart, thank you. It's a reciprocal relationship. And that's something I want us to get back to. And finally, the reason I capitalize the L in land is because, again, we want to make that shift. Think of land as not just an unliving piece of property that you can own. Land is a relative. Land is a part of our family. Land and the people take care of one another. So when we start to capitalize that land, when we start to think about what the words really mean, when we're acknowledging this territory, that's when we see true change happen. Thanks, Rain. So I always like to start a little bit about that. And I remember the first time I got asked to give a speech in front of a room full of doctors, and I felt very like, oh my goodness, like little old me. And they were all really, really well spoken, and they were all very kind. And they all gave land acknowledgements, every single one of them, before they spoke. And then when I stood up and I started to speak, and I asked them, like, do any of you know what unceded means? No one raised their hand, except for one First Nations girl who was a TA in the very back went, stolen. So she knew, but it was really remarkable how few people actually knew what the meaning was. So just to that's kind of why I like to start this. So I like to acknowledge the land. I like to acknowledge a few people that really helped me along the way. I know a lot of times people give their acknowledgements at the end, but I like to give it at the beginning because I wouldn't be where I am without these people. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I connected to my culture, what it was like growing up urban Indigenous, and what that looked like for me really kind of figuring out who I was, how it was for discovering the martial arts, my journey to professional fighting, and how I became more of a holistic athlete and really started to find those integrations of my culture and my sport together, and how that serves me well today. I'll be open for a little bit of Q&A at the very end. And throughout, I'm just going to ask some questions for all of you that feel free to write in the chat box or just to sit with yourself and think about the answers. Trying to make this as interactive as possible while still making it a presentation. So really welcome all of you just to join along with me and have these thoughts for yourself. So merci, thank you to the UC Learning Circle for inviting me here today. Very glad to be a part of this. You guys are doing really amazing work. So thank you so much for making this possible. And merci to my mentors. So most of them don't know it yet, but they're all mentors to me, and they've all really guided me. So Chelsea Vowell, she wrote the book Indigenous Rights, which is my absolute favorite book. I always tell people that it really breaks down a lot of elements of Indigenous culture and politics. And reading it, it just sounds like it's just like you're talking to a friend and you're just asking questions and they're just responding. And it's written in a very conversational tone, which I really appreciate. I like to thank Jen Green. So she runs this really awesome podcast called Go Smudge Yourself, and serving fresh, hot, decolonial takes. She loves to call out the government. And again, it's just like two friends sitting and having coffee, which is really, really cool, breaking down, a lot of those concepts that some people may be afraid to ask about. So I always tell people, read that book and listen to that podcast. That's an amazing way just to learn a bit more about our culture. Alima Mae McFarland. So she is a Kanaka Maoli, a Native Hawaiian fighter in Bellator. She's someone I just absolutely, truly admire, someone who's really inspired me as an MMA fighter. She really, really walks her talk and really runs a lot of missing and murdered Indigenous women groups and self-defense group, and just really takes care of her community. And that's something I always strive to do. And finally, my mamel, my grandmother, Jeanette Schoenschlegel, born Desjardins. So I always tell people we're Michif, we're Métis from the Desjardins family in Saint François Xavier, which is one of the Red River settlements. So if I got any cousins out there, hey, what's up? Are you? We're all out there. Yeah, she really taught me about what it was like to be, or what it meant to be Métis, something that I didn't always understand because we didn't always have a word for it. It was just the way we were. And I'll explore that a little bit later. So, Alana Cook, who am I? And one way, Serene, you can one way I like to break it down is the medicine wheel. So many of you have probably seen this before. Some of you may not have. This is the medicine wheel. And you can find a lot of these images online. This is just one I really like because it also had the directions, the sacred medicines, the stages of life. And just so you know, not every Indigenous group does use the medicine wheel. This is something that was gifted to the Métis that we also can use, but not all Métis people do it. I personally, though, find a lot of connection with its teachings. And the idea is that most of us are imbalanced in some way. You know, when we look at our lives, um, we want to be like a wheel. And when one side of the wheel is flat, we don't quite roll or move as well. So the four parts of the medicine wheel are the physical side, the mental side, the emotional side, and the spiritual side. And for me, I find that I'm happiest and healthiest in my life when I'm balanced, or at least trying to be balanced in all those sides. Growing up, I felt like a lot of my identity was always in the physical side, and then it was in the mental side, and I was really neglecting that spiritual side. And as I become an adult and I slowly look at this and I try and think, okay, how can I make myself feel more balanced every day? I find I'm happier and healthier than I've ever been. Next slide, please. So, speaking from the mental realm, I hold a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of the Fraser Valley and a master's in Indigenous land-based education from the University of Saskatchewan. I'm currently a doctorate student at the University of British Columbia, working towards my PhD in kinesiology under Dr. Janice Forsyth. My proposed research will focus on the intersections between Indigenous culture and the martial arts. And I am also an adjunct professor of kinesiology at the University of British Columbia, teaching a course called KIN 368, Indigenous Sport and Physical Culture in Settler Canada. Currently on leave to focus on my PhD. I know most people, get their PhD and then they start teaching, but I like to do some things backwards. So this is just how my path has been laid out. And it was really amazing because it showed me how much I really enjoy teaching. It really inspired me to push on to the next stage of my career. The physical realm, probably why most of you here today. So this is a photo from one of my debut fight when I won in the first round by rear naked choke. So that was very exciting. I am a professional mixed martial arts athlete. I am currently, as of this morning, the number 10 ranked pound for pound female MMA fighter in Canada. And then I'm also a women's a women's kickboxing and grappling coach. My goal really is to be the first Métis woman in one of the big three MMA fight leagues, so the UFC, Bellator, PFL, or one. That would be amazing. And something I like to tell people when I coach, and I'm just going to get into this right off the bat. I hear a lot of people who coach and who are athletes, they always talk about how they want to inspire the next generation. And that's really awesome. But I tell people I want to inspire the next generation and I want to inspire my generation and I want to inspire my previous generation. I think martial arts is for everybody. And the beautiful thing is you can see people that have never done a sport in their entire life and they start jujitsu or they start boxing and they pick it up and they fall in love with it. And that is my favorite thing to see as a coach is seeing, a mom who's 45 with three kids and has never seen herself as a fighter or as an athlete suddenly start to get into it and just really discover that for themselves, or someone who's a senior citizen and they start discovering a little bit about jujitsu and they make some friends and they become part of the community. That is my favorite thing about coaching, and that really warms my heart. So I always say you're never too old to start. The spiritual cultural realm. So Michif on my mother's side from the Desjardins family, as I said. I'm also a member of Métis Nation British Columbia, and my local charter community is the Golden Ears Métis Society. I'm also the founder of Walking Like Warriors, which is a self-defense group for Indigenous women and youth. We've now expanded. We work with all ages, all genders, all fitness levels, on reserve, off reserve, non-Indigenous. My heart will always be working with the Indigenous community, but we try to be inclusive and empowering and culturally safe for all. And this is a way that I've started to give back, and that I can continue to keep giving back to a community that has given so much for me. And the reason I started Walking Like Warriors was because I noticed there was a really big gap when it came to a lot of self-defense groups and cultural safety. And I thought, I need to bridge that gap. So that's something that really fills my cup when I get to do these. And, there's a tape from 2 weeks ago. My partner and I did the Walking Like Warriors workshop. So feel free to check that out. And finally, the emotional realm. So I am grateful to live out here in Ontario. So I moved out here 8 months ago with my partner and our corgi. We packed up our cars. We drove across Canada. It was a huge adventure, and we're really grateful to be here. I treasure spending time with my family and I'm friends, and I enjoy traveling, low incline hiking. That's walking, but I always try and dress up like that. Traditional beadwork art and corgi picnics. And that's when we have picnics and bring all our corgis together and play. It's magical. It's just instant serotonin. So before I just got into today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. So something for you to think about, and I'll just give you a minute. How are different parts of your life represented by the four quadrants? And this can be something that people have never really thought about before. And a lot of people too, I noticed, like the spiritual side, especially if people think they're not religious, this can be something that they think like, oh, like I don't really feel comfortable with that. Spirituality is so fluid. It doesn't have to mean that you're part of an organized religion. It just means like, how do you take that time to yourself? How do you take that time to connect with your community? How do you take that time just to find gratitude in your day? And that seems to be the side that most people are missing. And when we bring that back into our lives, that's when I find a lot of people say they start to feel a bit more full. So just taking some time, feel free to pop it in the chat if you like, or just at home and take some time to think about it. Are you taking care of all the sides of your wheel? Next slide, please, Serene. So, talking about me growing up, what is Métis, Michif? So I tell people it's like the month and the drink, Métis. And Métis is actually, if you look back, it's a Canadian French word. It's not actually an Indigenous word. So a lot of Métis people have been reclaiming the word Michif because that is the word for mixed blood in the actual Michif language. So I'm slowly starting to learn my language. So that's something that I'm becoming more comfortable describing myself as, and that really aligns with who I am. Also, because so many people of us, I was born in 91, I'm 33, and in elementary school and in high school, we were taught that just if you're part Native and part white, you're Métis. And that's not true at all. Métis is its own thing. It's its own rich culture. I just have some photos of just some of the ways that Métis culture has been expressed through the years. So we have the sash, we have fiddling, we've got jigging, we've got big beadwork art, we've got bannock, or as my Mimel calls it, galette. We've got the infinity sign. So there's so many different signs of our culture. And if you want to move on to the next slide. But growing up, I didn't really know I was Métis, but something I knew was I had a lot of cousins. Like a lot of cousins, like more than all my friends at school. I would talk about my cousins and they were like, you've got more than two? And I remember everyone in my family that was older was auntie and uncle. It was always auntie or uncle. It wasn't, like even if someone was, like a cousin, if they were older than me, it was auntie or uncle. And again, a lot of my friends are like, man, you got a lot of aunties and uncles. And, our food was a little bit different. So at Christmas, we would have tourtière, which is, it's like a meat pie that was traditionally had. We would have choke cherry jam on our bread. My papa would go hunting and fishing in the fall, and then we'd have caribou chili, we'd have moose sausage. Our music was different. So my mama would play, my great uncle Andy Desjardins has a very famous fiddling album with playing the Red River Jig. So we'd play that and we'd dance around the kitchen. And I remember my mama would grab a broom and she'd start dancing with the broom. And we just thought it was the funniest thing as kids. And then I got older, I realized, oh, this is actually a Métis dance. And our language was different. So we all spoke French to each other. And then I could hear my mama and her sisters, they spoke a French that sounded a little bit different. And I learned now that they know it's parts of Michif. So I knew I was different. I knew I was a little bit different than my friends, but I didn't really have the word for it yet. I didn't really know what to call it. Next slide, please. So that's my brother and I as little kids, and then our glow up as young adults. So my brother and I were in public school in Maple Ridge. It was at an elementary school called Riverside Elementary, which had really low numbers of Indigenous students. And I remember in grade 2, it kind of started, I started getting pulled out of class for different reasons. So one day I got pulled out, and then they just, Mr. Sam, who was like the native art teacher, as everyone called him, did some art with us and some other kids. And then one day I got pulled out and I got to go do carving. And then one day me and my brother went on a canoe trip that none of my other friends knew about. And I finally, kind of like my friends like, where are you going? I'm like, I don't know. Like, where am I going? So I asked my mom one day, like, why do I get to do all these things? And she said, well, you're Aboriginal. You and your brother are Aboriginal. So, that's part of the Aboriginal program. And when you're a kid, you don't think about these things too deeply. So I was just like, okay, I'm Aboriginal. Like, cool. Like, this is part of it. And nothing about that really crossed my mind too much until I got to high school. And switch, please. So since I was a little kid, I'd always been a really, really big athlete. So my dad was a high school rugby coach, and he actually also played at UBC back in the day. So I was playing sports as soon as I could walk. I was playing soccer, rugby, volleyball, badminton. I was snowboarding, I was swimming, and I was doing everything. And then when I got to high school and I got pulled, again into the Indigenous youth groups, I started to become a bit more aware of how I looked. So now I was at a high school that was near the reserve. So we got a lot of kids came in that looked very visibly First Nation or very visibly Indigenous. And I remember I kind of felt like, oh, like I look really different. And, listening to their stories about their culture at home, it is a bit different from my culture. Like there's similarities, but also I was really seeing all the differences. And I had new friends, and I told them I was Aboriginal. That was the word used at the time. And I had a few of them tell me like, oh, like you don't look native, like you don't really look Aboriginal. And I started to feel, like maybe they made a mistake. Like I'm the only one here who looks like me, who has a family like me. And I asked my mom again, in grade 8, and she's like, well, you're not First Nation, you're Métis. It's different. And again, in school, we were still learning that Métis meant half and half. We were still not really learning the proper definition. And I thought, okay, like I know my mom isn't 100% native, so I can't be Métis. So what am I? And I just remember feeling so much confusion. So I decided to Google what is Métis. Next slide, Serene. And this popped up. And what 13-year-old girl is going to look at these photos and be like, yeah, that's me, right? So if you look at Indigenous people, it's very interesting. We are one of the only people in the whole world that seems to be stuck in time. So if you Google, Asian people, you'll get pictures of modern Asian people. If you Google Black people, you'll get pictures of just contemporary Black people. But if you Google Native people or Indigenous, you get photos like this. 9 times out of 10, you get photos of us from hundreds of years ago, how we looked historically. And growing up, especially, when I was 13 in the early 2000s, there was not a lot of Indigenous representation in the media. So when I looked to see like representations of myself and what it means to be Métis, there was nothing out there. So I felt very confused and very alone. Next slide, please, Serene. So I always like joke with my friends. I'm like, most of my native friends don't look like this, but this is again what you get when you Google native. And it has gotten a lot better in the last couple years. So, we see like there's that show Reservation Dogs, the movie Indian Horse, Lily Gladstone coming out in that new movie, the new Predator movie. But when I was in high school, all we had was smoke signals, and that just didn't really resonate with me. So again, I just didn't really think of myself as Indigenous for a long time or really seek out that part of myself. Next slide, please. Yeah, perfect. So what really helped me really kind of find that awakening and reconnect to my culture was I did a program called AIP, called the Aboriginal Youth Internship Program, now known as IIP. And this was for students. Well, first of all, I did my bachelor's in English, so my parents were worried about me. And I found out about this program, which was for people who had just newly graduated. And it was all Indigenous folks from all across BC. And we did an internship at the government level. And this was the first time I'd met Indigenous people from outside of Maple Ridge. And a lot of them actually like looked like me. Next slide, please, Serene. So something really clicked. For the first time, there was people besides my cousins who looked like me, who sounded like me, who had similar experiences to me. So there was 20 of us. Some people looked really First Nations, some people looked very fair, some were very connected to their culture, some weren't. And it finally showed me that being Indigenous was more than a dictionary definition or a one size fits all box. And it made me understand like all of them understood what it felt like to look in two worlds and not really feeling like you belonged in either and feeling like you're not indigenous enough or you're not white enough and just not being able to fit in. And so for the first time in my life as an indigenous woman, I felt like I fit in. And these are just some photos of us, at different events, at work, just out having fun. We went surfing. And yeah, this was a really happy year for me because this is when I first started being proud and feeling confident in being an Indigenous woman. So one more time, I'll hit you with the medicine wheel. When do you feel like you connect with your culture, or where do you feel some barriers? And I won't ask like when was the big moment when you connected with your culture, because some people maybe won't have that or haven't had that yet. And for some people, also like myself, it's a bit of a struggle sometimes. Like some days I don't feel as connected, sometimes I feel more connected. Um, what are the barriers? What brings up those moments for you? So again, this is just something that for you personally, you could think about that, or you can write that in the box. But this is something that it's interesting to look back in your life and see where this hits home for you. So aging out of competitive sports. So in the midst of discovering my identity at age 19, I discovered something else, the martial arts. So I graduated from high school in 2009, and in the fall, I did my first year university at UVic, the University of Victoria. And this was known as a big party school. And I partied. I had a lot of fun. I made all these new friends. I was going out every night. There's no parents, no rules. But it gets old really fast. And after the first year, I went home. I moved home because I was lonely and I was really struggling with my mental health. And um, also, I aged out of competitive sports, and this had a really negative effect on me because up to age 18, you're always in these sports. I played rep soccer, I played high school, I played anything I could. And then it seemed like once you turned 18, you could either go pro or get picked up by a university team, or there was like beer league sports and rec sports. And I wasn't quite good enough to like, or nor did I really feel the desire to play at the pro level. But I didn't really like the structure of beer league. I didn't really like the emphasis on drinking and partying that was associated with sport. And I wanted to be more competitive than rec soccer. So I felt in this weird kind of middle. So I just stopped playing sports because I didn't see where I fit in. And this really contributed to me feeling sad and feeling angry. And I always say like it wasn't one big thing, it was a million little things. I'd gained some weight. I had, gotten out of a relationship. I was partying too much. And I just felt like a stranger in my own body. That was really hard for me. So this'll date me, but I just thought, I'm like, something needs to change. I need to do something to shake up my life, or I'm just gonna go crazy because I was so angry. And I picked up my parents' phone book. And I don't know if there's anyone in there who doesn't know what a phone book is. They use you probably went at your parents' house. So it's like the big book with all the local numbers. And I just flipped to the martial arts section and I just looked at all the different martial arts gyms in the area. And there was one that was called the Fight Pit. And I gave them a call, and the guy's like, yeah, come down, try for a week. And I went. And that's a photo from the Fight Pit. So as you can see, there was two girls, this did not get much better in the first couple of years when MMA was really booming. Um, so I started and I went to the gym, and like there was a couple other people that was also their first day, which was like, okay, I was like, I'm sticking with you. And we did a boxing class and we did a wrestling class. And I remember I went home and I threw up. I was like, oh my God, that was the hardest workout of my life. And I was instantly hooked. I had so much fun with it. And I went back and I went back and I went back every single day. And the way a martial arts gym is different from like a regular gym is it really is more of a team environment. So even though martial arts is an individual sport, you won't get very far if you are just by yourself. You really need that team around you of people to push you, to motivate you, to laugh with you. And it's really amazing because it's people from all different backgrounds. So like there's me, like this 19-year-old girl, and like there's like parents, there's like people in all different types of occupations, all different education levels, but everyone's really equal as soon as you step on the mats. And people, it's really funny. People would always make the joke, like, like, oh, you're a martial artist, I shouldn't mess with you. And if you know me and my friends, like I'm a very like I have lots of energy, but I'm a very calm person. Like I'm not really a hothead. And I credit that to martial arts because I noticed that the more I trained, the happier I was. So the more I was getting out all that energy, the more I was hitting the bag, the more I was getting all that anger out, the happier I felt, the calmer I felt, the more balanced I felt, the more in control I felt. And then I started to lose some weight. I made new friends that were really into those healthy habits. And I started to feel like the old me again, like the new old me, which was yeah, and I was very happy. But the thing about martial arts I started in 2010 and I started competing in tournaments in 2011. I mostly trained for fitness and for fun. So at that time, women weren't in the UFC. So there was no real career that was, like, oh, you're doing this, you get a couple fights in. It's definitely not like how it was now. Um, there wasn't really opportunities. So there's some photos from me at a couple different local tournaments. So I would go to tournaments, I would sign up and I got there and I would be the only girl. There'd be no one there. And so I was like, okay, I guess I don't get to compete today. Or I'd get there and there'd be a girl, but she was, like way bigger than me or way smaller than me. And we kind of both were like, all right, let's do this. Let's get some experience in, right? So it was hard at first, but every time I went, whether I won, whether I lost, I got injured, I celebrated, I cried, I went through all the emotions, but I kept going and I was hooked. I couldn't stop. And then if you look in the bottom right corner, that's actually a picture of me. I moved to Thailand in 2014 to live at a gym and study Muay Thai there. And I had my first fight. It was actually in a parking lot, like they not like just in the parking lot, but they set up a ring, like an outside ring, and I was like, isn't this like the grocery store? But they had it all set up really, really nice. And I wound up winning that fight by TKO, technical knockout. And I was like, you know what? When I move back to Canada, like this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to get into fighting. So I moved back to Canada in 2016, and during the year 2017, I had 3 fights: boxing, kickboxing, and Muay Thai. I lost every fight. All three, lost all three of them. Oh, you can go back, Serene. Um, and it sucked. And I never got knocked out, and I never, got finished. I always just came up just a little bit short. One was like I lost a split decision, which means, out of the 3 judges, one judge thought I won, the other 2 thought she won. I lost a unanimous decision. All the judges thought she won. Like it was always just out of my grasp. And one thought I was like, oh man, I totally won this fight, and then they said I didn't. And that was really hard. Actually, the third fight, this one really kicked my butt because the third fight I knew I lost. I just didn't take my cardio seriously. I cut some corners with my meals. I just didn't put in the work that I needed to. And in the end of the third round, before they announced the winner, I already knew that I had lost that fight. And I told myself, like, I never want to feel this way again. I absolutely never want to feel this way again. I need to make some changes and I need to step it up if this is what I want to do. So I took the rest of the year just off of fighting and I just trained. I just trained my little butt off. Um, and in that time on training, I was so nervous to get back in the ring because, It's embarrassing. Like it's not, like when you're the family and the friends, like just getting in the ring and doing that is so incredible. But you feel embarrassed, right? You think like, oh man, I put everything on the line and I couldn't get it done. And then in 20, oh gosh, what year was it? It was 2018. I got offered an amateur MMA fight. And in this one, you can do the next one, Serene. I decided, okay, I am going to take this fight so seriously. I trained like I was possessed. I made a schedule. I color coded my schedule. I got a dietitian. I was constantly bugging my coaches and my teammates to get extra training in. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do whatever it takes to win. And on May 5th, 2018, I had my first amateur MMA fight and I won by rear naked choke in 1 minute and 32 seconds of the first round. Oh, and I was over the moon. I finally won a fight in Canada and I was so proud of myself and I was ready to go on and win 10 more fights. But life happened, life happened. Shortly after that fight, I found out I had gotten into a master's degree program and I was like, you know what? I'm going to focus on school. This is a huge opportunity and then I'll fight in the fall. And then in the fall, I started to take on a little bit more at work and we had a few big events. So I thought, okay, it's not a good time for fight camp. Maybe I'll fight in the new year. But no one wants to fight at Christmas. You want to relax with your friends and you get the picture. It started to kind of slip away from me. And then COVID happened. And luckily, right before COVID, I met a really great guy who's still my partner. And we started training together. And looking back, things happen as they're meant to. I'm really grateful that I got to do all these really cool things and then still train. But I always had fighting in the back of my mind, and I always knew that I would return to it. So when COVID finally ended, I was having trouble finding an amateur fight again because there's not a lot of girls my size in Canada, and most promotions won't really pay to fly in an amateur. They only want to pay to fly in a professional. So it's expensive because at amateur, you don't get paid for fighting yet. Then in the fall of 2021, my coach told me that there was a new women's mixed martial arts league starting in Canada called the Palace Athena Women's Fighting Championship, or PAW-FC for short. And they had reached out to him offering me a fight at the professional level. Next slide, Serene. So I like to explain to people that this is a fight league. So the sport is MMA, and the league is the UFC. The league is PAW-FC. The league, it's a league that you fight in that you get signed to. So similar to how in the NHL, hockey is the sport, but the NHL is the league. MMA is the sport, but the UFC, PAW-FC is the league, if that makes it a bit more sense. And instead of amateur, I was offered it at pro. So the difference is you get paid, which is awesome, but things get a little more intense. So instead of doing 3 3-minute rounds, you're doing 3 5-minute rounds. And instead of just throwing, punches to the body, and you're allowed to throw elbows, you're allowed to do ground and pound. So it gets harder and it gets more dangerous, but again, there's a lot more opportunities for women all over the world to travel and, to level up. Next slide. So before I continue, I just want to talk a little bit about Indigenous knowledge. Sorry, this is a bit of a segue, but I swear it all ties in. So Indigenous knowledge is something I talk about a lot in my classes. It's contextual knowledge created and held collectively as it's passed down through each generations. So it's rooted in our teachings. It can be including but not limited to spirituality, our relationships, reciprocity, respect, stored within oral history, stories, our songs, our dance, our art, our ceremony. Indigenous knowledge was never written down because it is considered so important that you need to know it, which is really interesting. Next slide, please. And there's a really great paper by Dr. Marlene Brandt Castellano, who is a Mohawk scholar and university professor. And she wrote this essay that really resonated with me called Indigenous Knowledge in Global Context, where she outlines 3 key Indigenous sources of knowledge. And keep in mind, these 3 will often overlap and interact with each other. So there's traditional knowledge. So this is knowledge that was handed down more or less intact from previous generations, knowledge that your elders teaching you, that the knowledge keepers are teaching you, that you're absorbing from them. Then there's empirical knowledge. So this is gained through careful observation of the world around us. So just observing things, observing the ecosystem, observing the way people are. One of my favorite examples is if you've ever seen like a child learning to walk and they walk just like their parents, their parents didn't tell them like, oh, like walk with your head like this or your legs like this. They just watched and they just learned like that. Empirical knowledge. And then finally, there's revealed knowledge. And sometimes I lose people here because they think, oh, it's like, visions. But revealed knowledge is acquired through dreams, vision, and intuitions that are understood to be spiritual in origin. So spirituality is often seen as less valid than other knowledge sources because you can't really measure it. But I tell people, have you ever had that feeling in your gut that you just know something's wrong or something's right? That feeling that you need to do something, that the time is right for a certain activity or just a stage in your life? That's revealed knowledge when you really listen to yourself and your gut is telling you what you need to do. So while I was doing my master's, next slide, please, Serene. I got the chance to interview an elder named James Cook, who told me that Indigenous people were some of the greatest athletes the world had ever seen because we were natural warriors. And I thought, okay, I have this within me. I just need to look at my training like I'm a warrior getting ready for battle. So when I was getting ready for my pro debut, my coach had asked me like, "Do you want to do this?" And I said yes right away. But he said, "Okay, Alana, if you're not ready, you could lie to me. You could lie to yourself, you can lie to everybody. But as soon as you get in that cage and the door shuts, like everything comes out. People are going to see if whether you really want to be in there or not." So he said, take some time and think about this. And I thought, if I am going to be the best martial arts it can be, I really want to bring my culture into this because, we were warriors, we were fighters, we were athletes. There's so much knowledge and there's so many intersections. How can I take my culture and use it to make me a better athlete, make me a better warrior? So this is kind of how I interpret it, Indigenous knowledge and how I brought it into my martial arts practice. So if we look at traditional knowledge, learning from my coaches, I really listened. I really took that time to sit with them and listen to them and what they were saying, listening to other athletes that were masters of their craft and having them tell me and really trying to do what they were saying. Empirical knowledge, I was watching and I was studying other fighters. So you look in the gym and I'm thinking, okay, like so and so is the best fighter here. What do they do? I notice like they show up early. I noticed they're spending extra time, extra 15 minutes on the bag. I started watching and seeing what people were doing and imitating that. And then finally, revealed knowledge. I really listened to my heart. I tried to listen to myself. And when I was having, moments of doubt and, or when I needed time to be alone, I tried to really sit and acknowledge those feelings and really to connect with my body. And when it came time for my professional debut, I knew I was ready. And I always like to share this because this was like one of the coolest moments of my life. So I lived in Victoria briefly in 2014, and I trained at a gym called Zuma, Zujek Ultimate Martial Arts. And the woman in the photo with me, her name is Sarah Kaufman, and she fought in the UFC. So, 2014, I'd only been training for 3 or 4 years. And, there I was with this like UFC fighter, and I thought, man, she's so cool. It would be so, if you really need to be like her one day. And then when the fight was announced, in the next picture right there is the poster, I'm right beside Sarah. So she had left the UFC at that time and she was signed to PAW-FC. And there I am on the fight poster right beside her. So that was like, I got like emotional seeing that. I'm like, wow, like it took me 8 years, but I got there. So I always tell people that, when I'm coaching and people are, taking my class and they go like, oh my gosh, like I'm never going to be a fighter like you. I'm like, yeah, you will. Like you can 100% do this. I was exactly where you are looking at my coach thinking like, man, it'd be cool to be like her one day. And I'm not at Sarah's level yet, but just seeing that and knowing that I made that happen, I tell people, you can do whatever you set your mind to. So just some photos of me just when getting ready before my big fight. It definitely wasn't the easiest fight camp. Right in the middle of it, all the gyms in BC got shut down due to COVID. I was out there running in the snow. I was training in my friend's basement. Keenan was holding pads for me in the kitchen, but I kept training because I knew I was going to win this fight. And Posse flew me to Calgary a few days before the events. I got to do, I got to live the life of a professional athlete, which was really cool. Stay in a nice hotel. I did a media day, signed, posters, and I actually got to meet, that's Chris Cyborg. So she's a really well-known MMA fighter, really groundbreaking for females. So that was really cool. I got to see her and just live that dream. And finally, it was the day before the weigh-in, so I did my weight cut. For those of the people who aren't familiar, you don't ever fight at the weight you usually are. You usually cut, diet, and cut weight means like basically you sweat out a certain amount of weight. And so I fight at 135 pounds bantamweight, and then they do a face-off. So you go in and you do like a pose with your opponent, and this is a picture that usually gets a lot of media attention. Next slide, please. And as I was getting ready, I thought, you know what? I want to do something to really promote my culture, really show my culture. And this is right when I had started really getting into my walking like warriors. And you can see in the photo, I'm wearing little red dress earrings. So the Little Red Dress Project, the team of volunteers, they create these beaded red dress earrings to bring awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous women, and the proceeds from the sales goes towards the cost of creating and installing the missing person educational signage on Vancouver Island. And I thought, you know what, this is something really small, but this is a step in the right direction. And I had a lot of people ask me after about that, like what it mean. And so this was a time where I could also, I'm saying, okay, now like this isn't just for me. This can be a platform for something bigger than myself. And that was something, my culture's given me so much. I thought, like, how can I get back to it? And like starting to raise awareness and starting to spread that. That's one of the really cool things about sport is that, it can be a platform for so much. And the next slide, I won. Yes. So I won my first fight, and I went in there and I choked her out and I took her down. And I gotta tell you this too, they did not do me any favors. Like she was the huge favorite to win. She was the Golden Gloves boxer. She was ranked higher than me in jiu-jitsu. Like if you looked at us on paper, like she was the betting favorite. But I went in there and I just had that belief, and I had such a great coaching staff that I was able to do it. And I tell people this, my coach actually almost pulled me from that fight because a couple weeks out, I was just having meltdowns. I was so in my head, and I was like, I'm going to lose. I'm going to lose. She's so much better than me. Like, oh my God. And my coach had talked with me. He's like, you can't do this. You can't be this down on yourself because everyone can see it and it's just going to be negative. And he was like, you need to switch it up or else, I don't think you should do this fight. So I really had to take some time and just really just shift my thinking. And I went in there and I won. And one of my first thoughts after was like, what was I so afraid of? All those times I spent doubting myself, that helped her, And I always tell people this now, if you take away all those times you spend doubting yourself, you get so much time back because really you're only affecting yourself, right? You're only doing yourself a detriment. So after that, I realized, you know what? If every camp I go in, like obviously we're all going to have those moments. We're only human. But when we have those moments and we can step outside of ourselves and realize, you know what, this isn't helping me. This is not benefiting me in any way to have these thoughts that I am not good enough. Self-belief, like so much of fighting is mental. It's really like 90% of it is mental. You have to believe in yourself. Sorry, get a little emotional thinking about that too. And I just remember being backstage and getting ready and being like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like, I'm so scared. I'm going to throw up. And then after I won, I was like, okay, I can do this again. And next slide. And I accepted another fight. This one was in Vancouver. And I went against someone who was a bit more experienced. And it was another tough camp. I had those times, those emotions, like in my head, what am I doing? But now I had that belief in myself. I even had a friend say to me, she's like, you carry yourself a bit differently now that you've had that win and you've realized what you can do. And we went in and I had a really good victory. And then there I was 2-0. And women usually get into the UFC when they're 4-0, 5-0. So we said, like, man, like the future is so bright. This is exciting. Let's go for it. I'm going to be the next champ. And then I got injured. So next slide. So I herniated a disc in my neck at C6, C7. So anyone out there who's ever had this happen to them, had a bulging disc, or it's like there's nothing like nerve pain. It's awful. So you can kind of see in my little MRI there, like one of these discs is not like the other. It's like a little donut basically in your spine that absorbs impact between your vertebrae. And mine, I had my head snapped back in with someone who was very inexperienced. But that's another story. Advocate for yourself and go with training partners you trust. But yeah, it bulged out, and I was in so much pain that I could barely walk. I was bedridden. I could not wash my own hair or make my own food. I had to move in with my folks. Um, and this was a really dark time in my life because I was like, you know what? If I'm not a fighter, who am I? If I can't do martial arts, like what can I do? And this is where I kind of draw back to the medicine wheel. I was so in the physical, even though, I had been very much embracing my teachings. I was so in the physical that once that was taken away from me, I was just spinning out of control. I didn't know who I was. Oh yeah, it was a really dark time for me. I'm very grateful I had a very good support system around me. And I was able to get emergency surgery, and there's a photo of me post-surgery. It was really great lighting in that hospital room. I remember thinking that. I'm like, this is actually a very good photo of me. And then for 6 weeks after recovery, you can't lift anything that's over 5 pounds. So like that's a jug of milk. So again, even though like I'd been fixed, I couldn't go back to training right away. I had to basically not learn how to walk, but I had to do slow walks, just slow walks every day, and just really going from like this powerhouse to just someone who felt very frail. And again, just because I put so much identity into myself as an athlete, this was the first time in my life that I really felt defeated. I really felt like I didn't know what I was going to do and if I was going to go on. Um, but you know what? I healed. I healed and I got back. So 9 months later, I definitely rushed it a bit. Looking back, I should have taken a bit more time off, but 9 months later, I got back and I had my third professional fight. Um, and if you had told me when I was recovering from surgery that I would be fighting within 9 months, I would not have believed you. And this is what I say whenever anyone is going through a tough time or experiencing depression, the loss of a loved one, a bad injury, anything, it is really hard to be hopeful when you're caught up in the thick of it. When it's immediate, you can't see outside of it, but you have to remember that you're going to get past it and that, one day it's just going to be a memory. And this was really, really hard for me to learn. But looking back, this was a big life lesson for me, but I got it done. I did it. And I remember I had a friend told me that most people, I've had so many people told me like with my neck injury, I shouldn't be fighting again. And he said that most people will tell you that you can't do it because they can never picture themselves doing it. And I really took that to heart. So unfortunately, I lost the fight by decision. I didn't get the outcome I wanted, but it was still a good fight. It showed me that I can keep fighting and that I'm going to be okay. And just to give you a little idea of what my schedule looks like. So a few months after that fight, my boyfriend and I got the opportunity to train at a gym out in Ontario here. And we just were so obsessed with it, we decided to move here. So we're living here now. I'd been accepted into my PhD program at the time. So I had that fun conversation of telling my supervisor that I was moving halfway across the country if she still wanted to be my supervisor. And we made it work. So this was the schedule that I made for her to show her that like, see, I can do it. I can balance full-time athlete and full-time student. So I train almost every day. I take Sundays off. I usually train in the morning and then I train in the evening. I usually do like one heavier session. So I have like the MMA, the pro team, we train together in the mornings. Well, I say around like 11 to 1. Then I do, some work. I'll have an afternoon session between 5 and 7 where I'll just like work a bit more technique, and then I'll usually do a little bit more class work or reading in the evening. Once a week, I'll do like a recovery day. I'll do like sauna, massage, or just, have a big stretch. And I always tell people too, like, this is like ideal. I almost never actually hit the schedule. Usually I'll take off one class a week because I've gotten a lot better at listening to my body and realizing like, oh no, like you need to take tonight off, Alana. MMA fighters, like, we're notorious for overtraining. So just as something one of my coaches said, we strive for perfection, but we live in reality. So this is what my schedule looks like most of the time. But when I need to have a break or listen to my body, I listen to my body. So we're almost at the end of here. I just want to talk just a little bit more about how I've, especially recovering from my neck surgery, it really made me realize that, okay, I need to take care of my wheel. I need to really like bring my wheel, and I can bring all those elements into my sport. And this is how I've done it. So if you could skip forward just 2 slides, Serene. So again, just to the medicine wheel. So for me personally, this is how I take care of my physical health. So I train martial arts, obviously sport specific training. And this is also for anyone out there who does their sport. This gives you some great ideas. I do strength and conditioning. So not just training my sport, I do things outside that'll help my body get stronger. So I'll lift weights, I'll go for a run, improve my cardio. I take care of my nutrition. If I'm very lucky, I have the resources where I can have a dietitian, someone that works with me to kind of make sure I'm, just not to make sure I'm eating healthy, but just to give me a bit more education because, there's so much we don't know about proper nutrition that we think we know from the media. So just learning a little bit more about protein intake and how much I need to be eating and what I need to be eating to maintain my schedule. The best thing I ever did, one of the best things I ever did for myself as an athlete was hire a nutritionist. Highly recommend it. And then active recovery. So stretching, mobility, doing your physio. These are parts where we all get a little bit lazy, but they are so important because, when we push our body, we've also got to take care of it. We've also got to take care of it. Mental health. So I study new techniques. I'll go to seminars, I'll watch YouTube videos, not, just listening to my coaches, but I'll explore outside the gym. I'll try and listen to new things, what's happening. I read books or I listen to audiobooks. So, when I'm driving out to my physio place, it's like 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back. There's lots of really great authors out there. So I just went through the David Goggins book. That's always really fun. Just listening to something, very motivational or something that's related to your sport, instead of just listening to the radio. It's a really good opportunity just to get some information in and just keep learning. Mental toughness training. So I know ice baths are all the fad right now, but getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So one of the hardest parts about fighting that most people don't know is cutting weight, and it's sitting in that sauna and sweating and not eating until you are a certain weight. Um, it's not a great part of the sport, but it is part of the sport. And just getting used to your body being uncomfortable and putting it in those tough situations, like not putting it where you're in pain, but putting it where you're uncomfortable and learning to be okay with that and learning to push past that. And then journaling and reflection. I write everything down. I always keep a training journal about what I've done, what I need to improve on, what I've done well. And then usually, if I'm injured or if I'm, taking a rest or getting ready for a fight on fight week, I'll like read back through that. And that's really a nice way of being like, look, see, I have done the work and reminding myself of what I've already learned. Emotionally, recognizing when I need a break. So that is I love to go hard. I love to like push myself, but just realizing when I need a day off and when I need to eat the rich food and when I need to sleep in and take some time for yourself. One rest day is not going to derail your athletic career. I've heard a lot of times like we don't over perform, we under recover. So really take your recovery seriously. Social time with my teammates and friends outside the gym. I don't have a lot of friends outside the gym here, but just spending that time to chat with people and just being outside of that competitive environment is always really nice for your brain just to relax and hang out and talk about things other than sports. Communication and counseling. So I see a sports psychologist and we talk it out. That has been super helpful for me. My boyfriend, who was not a big believer in counseling or therapy at all, started seeing a sports counselor, and he saw a lot of benefit from it. It actually really helped him. And you know what? Some people aren't ready for that. And if you're not, just talk to your coach, talk to your friends, just learning how to talk to people and just sharing when things are making you upset or things are making you emotional. Talking through things is so important. Um, and positive self-talk. So not just talking to other people, but talking to yourself. I can't stress how important this is. Negative self-talk will never help you. So whether you need like I have post-it notes on my wall with like things that like make me smile, watch inspirational short video clips, whatever you need to motivate yourself. You want to have that positivity because you got to live in your own head, make it a nice place to be. And finally, spiritual health. Yes, it's for sport too. So myself, I always smudge right before I fight. I also smudge at home. I do it a lot during fight week. It really helps for me just to recenter and ground myself. Some people pray. So whatever you can do that really makes yourself feel gratitude and feel grounded, find out and use it because there's so many benefits. I talk to my family, I talk to my parents, I talk to my mama. I remind myself of where I come from, who I am, and what I'm fighting for. Getting outside. I'm very lucky that I live somewhere where there's parks nearby, and I try and just go for a little walk out and be outside every day. I try to leave my phone at home and just be in nature and reconnect with the world around me. Getting barefoot in the grass if I can. There's so many scientific studies about how that grounding is so good for you. And decolonizing my sport. So I really try to find ways to embrace my culture, my sport wherever I can and raise awareness. So whether it's my appearance, like I always like to have my braids in when I fight, I have my earrings, my music, my logo, my Alana logo designed by Evelyn Alec. It's got my mountain lion in there. It's got the Métis infinity loop. And I actually was one of the first fighters that when the announcers were announcing me to come in for my fight, I asked them to do a land acknowledgement. And they they were like, I don't know if you can see this. And I just told them like, this is very important to me. It means a lot. And listening back, they did that. That was really cool to see and to hear. So my last question that I will ask for you, and you can just take this home. I just have one more slide after this. How can you find balance with what is important to you? So whether you're an athlete, whether you're you're a parent, whatever you do, where can you find balance? But also remember life is unbalanced. Even if you're not a perfect circle, you can keep rolling. Don't compare yourself to others. We strive for perfection, but we live in reality. I'll say it again. But when I felt the best in my life is when I've started to take care of all those aspects of myself. And then finally, just before we end our time together, the next slide, Serene. I just want to leave you with this. I cannot imagine what my life would be like if I hadn't discovered the martial arts. It's changed my life. I hope everybody has something in their life that they're as passionate and happy with as I am with martial arts. Just some photos. It's given me the opportunity to travel the world. I've been to Calgary, Toronto, Thailand, Australia, Japan. Martial arts is really cool because even if you don't speak the language, they can still, we can still understand each other through our movements. It's helped me make the most incredible friendships with some of the most strong women and men I've ever met. It helped me meet, the love of my life, my partner Keenan. We both share that love for martial arts that really unites us both. Through being a coach, it's helped me find a sense of confidence and mentorship and seeing how I can share, again, that idea of reciprocity, how we take care of the land's taking care of us. My sport has given so much to me and those beautiful coaches and people in my life. How can I give back to other people now and share that gift of martial arts? It's helped me connect to my culture and my experience as an Indigenous woman in a very empowering and very humbling way. It's, provided me with a career through fighting and coaching. It is the scariest thing I have ever done in my life, and it is the most rewarding. It's given me confidence, it's given me peace, and it's given me joy. Thank you. Our land is seated, and our people are undefeated. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alana. That was very inspiring and just so great. And um, we're happy to cheer you on in future fights and whatnot. And yeah, we just have a couple questions here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just was on. I saw you write those questions. I was like, I can't stop. I just, I was so in my flow. Thank you all so much for listening. Yeah, absolutely. What were some of the questions?
Yeah, we have someone that's interested in having you speak at one of their events. I think you posted your email there on that last slide, so hopefully they can check that out. And then our next question is the person's just saying, thank you so much for sharing your story. And uh, this person's going to reflect on this so much. The question is if you can tell us more about the Indigenous internship program you participated in and if you would recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was called AIP when I did it, Aboriginal Youth Internship Program. It's a partnership with the BC government. If you look it up now, it's IIP, Indigenous Youth Internship Program. I don't know if they're done looking for participants for this upcoming year yet, but what it is you apply, and then for 9 months, you intern with one of the ministries. So most people will be located in Victoria, because that's where most of the ministries are. There's always one person that goes up to Fort St. John because there's a ministry up there, and then a few are in Vancouver. So I worked with the BC Arts Council, the Ministry of Communications, tourism, and community development. You know, like some people were in finance, some people were in tourism. It really depends what your interest is. You can put it in there, and then they'll try and match you. And then I always said, because I finished my degree and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life still. So this was a really good opportunity just to get a lot of job experience. And what they also do is they create a nice mentorship, or a nice a community. So it's all Indigenous folks who apply for it that are accepted. And so you get that opportunity just to, like, government can be a very colonial place. It's gotten a lot better, but it's really great to have that support. And then, so you do that for 9 months, and then the last 3 months, you get to work with an Indigenous organization of your choosing. So, I actually worked with the Vernon Native Housing Society up in Vernon, and then when I was there, I was just running their youth program. So you get to choose where you go. So, highly recommend it. You get a very good competitive salary, and it's a very great opportunity just to take the next step if you're coming out of school, or maybe even coming out of high school, and you want to learn more about get more job experience.
Cool, thank you. And then how does the medicine wheel resonate with you and in different phases and aspects of your life?
Oh, very good question. So definitely it's funny, like when you look at the medicine wheel, you see like the East is very much I believe it's the East is the physical side, and it's also youth. So like you look at us as like kids, and we're always like so physical, and we're all in our bodies. And then something that happens, as we get older, many people stop moving, and they start, when they can't move, they kind of get maybe a bit more into their mental side. And as we get later in life, whether we have children or not in our families, and maybe as we're getting older, we're approaching approaching the end of our life. From what I hear, people like connect a bit more to that spiritual side, but that doesn't necessarily have to be what everybody else paths looks like. um, I would definitely say at different parts of my wheel are bigger than others. So right now I actually unfortunately have a knee injury. So that always, it always sucks to get injured, but that was a really, I took that as an opportunity to sit back and reframe and look and go, okay, I can't put as much energy and time into my physical right now. How can I make sure my other parts of my life are being tended to? So that's actually one of the reasons I'm doing this presentation today. I told Serene, I'm like, I want to, share my story a bit more. I want to focus a bit more on my walking like warriors. So unfortunately, you never want to be forced to have to focus on one. But I think like in life, sometimes we get these little setbacks, and it is a good reminder to see maybe we have been putting too much time into one part of our life, and where can we enhance others. Hopefully that kind of answers it too.
Definitely, I think so. And our next question is, um, sorry.
Nice. I'm also just going to put in the chat box. I had a few people ask me about my program Walking Like Warriors. So It's just walkinglikewarriors.com. We like just got the website 2 weeks ago, so I'm very proud of it. And then you can put a comment in there or connect with me if you're interested in any speaking roles as well, or if you want to bring the program out to any of your communities. More than happy to chat.
Cool, thank you. And yeah, so our next question is, what can we do to stop sexual abuse in sports, especially within our national teams?
Oh, so it's definitely a loaded question, and I definitely don't know the full answer to it. So something I've seen in martial arts, especially, I find there's been I had a good friend of mine who was actually abused by her coach. And one of the reasons that she didn't talk about it was that shame, and she felt like there wasn't people that she could talk to about it. So with martial arts, especially because it can be such like a ingrained community, whenever people want to start, I always say like look at the gyms, and like I said, feel free to message me also on this if you want to join martial arts and you don't know what gym to go to. Um, it's a small community. If you go to a gym and there's not a lot of women, that's usually a little bit of a sign that maybe it's not a good atmosphere. I actually did a podcast a little while ago. Some of the answers are kind of escaping me right now, but we talked a little bit about what to look for in a gym, like what are some green flags, what are some red flags. It's a podcast I did. 1 second, to hosts and panelists. I'll do it to everyone. Um, com. So that is my website. And then on the Radical Narrative podcast with Mylan Tatusis, I have an episode, and I specifically talk a lot about things to look about when you're going into a gym and how to protect yourself. So at the national level, I don't have like the strong answer for that. I would just say learning, just speaking up to people and having that community. When I started doing martial arts, I was one of very, very few women. So I was very blessed that nothing bad happened to me. I had some strong friendships. I had people looking out for me. But it's so important now, especially that, we women, we stick together, we talk to each other. And like we're just on alert, right? We hold people accountable for their actions. And not being afraid to ask people, but when people say they're a martial artist or a coach, be like, okay, well, what's your experience? Like who knows you? This is like what we do in community, right? We always ask like what community you're from, who knows you, who can speak to you and speak to your character. Um, Hopefully that answers a little bit of it. But again, if anyone if wants to watch the Walking Like Warriors podcast from 2 weeks ago, my partner and I talk a little bit about situational awareness, body language, body confidence, and just some tips like that.
Thank you. And our next question is, have you had like a few injuries, and if so or if not, how do you take care of not getting injured again?
I have a lot of injuries. Yeah, unfortunately, martial arts is the most dangerous, MMA is the most dangerous sport in the world. So the first time I got a bad injury, it was because I didn't use my voice enough. I was doing a jujitsu class, and someone asked if I would roll with them, like do a have like a match with them. And they were male, they were bigger than me, they were stronger than me, they were a higher rank. And immediately we were going, and he was getting very aggressive, and I just was a little not gonna say cocky, but I just kind of thought like I can handle this. I'm tough. I'm a pro fighter. And I didn't tell him to lighten up. And then he wound up doing just like really cranking my head back, and I should have tapped. I should have, if you get put in a position with martial arts, like a sub where you're feeling physical pain, what you do is you tap, or you verbally tap, you say tap, and then they let you go. But I was kind of thinking like, what, I can get out of this. This guy, like, he hasn't got me. And I wasn't smart about it that way. And that wound up to herniating my disc, unfortunately. So, um, I do take some responsibility for that. I should have told him that the pace was too high. I should have tapped when I started to feel pain. Um, and it says not secured. I can't get into her website. Um, Yeah, sorry, if you look it up on Google, walkinglikewarriors.com, it should show up. Sorry about that. So just really learning from every injury. This last injury I got, I think I was under eating. I wasn't having as many calories as I should be doing when I was going into a hard training session. I wasn't listening to my body about when I needed rest. So really it goes to show like having kind of leaving your ego at the door and taking care of your body are two very important things for not getting injured. And having that communication with your training partners. We all want to be tough, but also knowing when to say like, hey, like I need to back off or I need you to back off because I need to take care of my body.
Great. And then what keeps drawing you back to school? In other words, what did you decide to do your master's and PhD in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did my bachelor's because, that's what my parents told me you do after high school. You do more school. So I did my bachelor's degree and I remember leaving after my last class and going, I'm never going back to school again. And I actually had gotten a job with iSpark, the Indigenous Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation Council, which is the sport body for BC. And I got to be working in community again and working with all these Indigenous communities. I kind of realized I'm like, I would love to do this more. And then I heard about this, a master's program that was land-based and an Indigenous cohort. And I remember hearing that and I looked into it and I'm like, I go back to that revealed knowledge, right? All of a sudden, something in me was like, you should take this program. You should apply for this program. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that this is what I wanted to do. And this is where I felt like I was meant to be. So I applied and I did my master's, and it was an amazing experience. And then I finished that and went, wow, that was a lot of work. I'm done with school. We're never going back. Um, and then I was giving a speech a few years later, and I was lucky enough to be put in contact with the dean or the head professor of the kinesiology department at UBC. And he asked me, he's like, have you ever thought of teaching? And because they had that Kin 368 course, he's like, we're really looking for somebody to teach that course. We would love to have somebody who's Indigenous, who has experience with sport in Indigenous culture. And I had so much imposter syndrome right away. I thought like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? Um, but again, I sat with it a bit and I thought, you know what, I think I'm meant to be doing this. And I went and I saw a few of my former students actually in the chat, which is hilarious. And I went and I taught 3 semesters and I realized how much I love teaching adults and love talking about my culture and love sharing it. And I had the opportunity to meet and have coffee with Dr. Janice Forsyth. I just had wanted to meet her, and the more we talked, all of a sudden I just asked her at the end. I said, you know what, if I applied for my PhD, would you be my supervisor? And she said yes. And I went, okay, I guess I'm going for my PhD now. So I didn't really always have these big plans. I just really let these things kind of happen naturally, which is really hard because, I love to plan things ahead. But I think as I'm getting more into my life, I'm realizing um, you get led to do things. Like one of my old professors, Manu Meyer, something she said to me once that really stays with me. And she said, when you make a big decision, are you doing this because you feel obligated to do it or because you feel led to do it? Are you obligated or are you led? And like when I did my bachelor's, I just kind of felt obligated to do it. Like this is what I should be doing. But with my master's degree and my PhD and martial arts, these are all things that I feel like I am led to do.
Nice. And our next question is, to what extent do you think it is important to address fights with spiritual approach? Is it usual that fighters be fond of of the spiritual background?
So this is actually a lot of what I'm doing my PhD on is those intersections between martial arts and Indigenous culture. So I've had a really great opportunity to sit down and speak with a lot of Indigenous martial artists. So Regan Running Rabbits, Riley Marchand, Tisha Guthrow, Ashley Nichols. So I got to ask them about how they bring their spirituality and their culture into their sport. And they've said different things with me. Like I don't want to kind of disclose their personal conversations, but they said things like they really think about when they're doing that walkout, it's like their ancestors going into battle. They take a lot of that warrior spirit, that mental preparation, that being out on the land and preparing yourself for something. A lot of them, they'll bring some regalia sometimes when they do a walkout. One of them is really big into, he says, I always give a great war cry before I go. And just on other parts of it too, if you look at when we sit in Big House or sit in our Indigenous communities, we always sit in a circle. And the idea is that everybody's equal. No one's more important than another in the circle. Everyone's equal. Everyone has a voice. So in martial arts, although we do really honor the head coach and we recognize people's rank, as soon as people step on the mats, everyone's equal. So people will have different skill levels, but you need to show everyone the same level of respect. So part of that reciprocity, when you get into martial arts, people will give so much of their time for you. People, coaches, people will show you different techniques and really help you along. But then when you become, a pro or you get good, it is kind of expected and also appreciated that you start to show others techniques and you help new people too. So there's that constant sense of reciprocity, which I would tie to a spiritual practice as well. So whether there's things that are specifically cultural that we see, like cutting weight is very similar to sweat lodge. I remember having that recognition when I was in sweat lodge once. I thought like this is very similar to what I go through when I'm getting ready for a fight. And the more I start to look for those similarities, the more I start to see them, which is why I really want to do my whole PhD on it. But yeah, definitely if you start pulling that thread, you will see a lot of similarities.
Um, so how do you find balance with what is important for each one, like aspect of like the medicine wheel?
Yeah, great question. Um, I don't know. No one's really told me I'm the perfect, I don't feel like the perfect balance person yet. Um, I just try and do a little bit every day. Definitely, I would say my spiritual side is still the smallest part of my wheel. And maybe that'll change when I get older, maybe it won't. But I would say that um, right now I am feeling a little sad just because I can't, I'm still a little bit limited mobility wise because of my knee. But most days I would say I feel happy, I feel content, I feel like I'm at peace. And then when I look back and I think like, oh yeah, I am hitting all those things. I am really finding ways. And then if I have some free time in the day, I do try and think of, okay, what have I neglected today? What part of my wheel? Maybe I need a walk with my dog, then I'm spending a little bit of time outside and also a little bit of time with somebody and something I love. Sometimes I'll just take some time and read a book. I'm doing a lot of stretching outside right now because the weather's great. So just again, moving my body, eating some healthy food. And then sometimes it's just, laying on the couch with my partner. That also nourishes me. That also fills in part of that side. So I would say, if I'm starting to notice a few days go by where I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling upset, that's where I really kind of look at my wheel. I have it printed on the wall and I think, okay, what part am I neglecting right now? And it's usually something in there.
Nice. And do you know if there's any two-spirit fighters that you've come across within the martial arts industry or like yeah, MMA
Yeah,
fighting?
great question. I haven't had anyone disclose to me that they are two-spirit. There's a lot of queer female pros that are non-Indigenous, which is cool to see. I don't think there's any openly queer male fighters yet. Unfortunately, like, MMA is not perfect. There is still quite a bit of toxic masculinity that we're trying to weed out slowly but surely. Myself, I do identify as two-spirit. I don't talk about it too much. I am in like a heterosexual relationship with my partner too, and there's so many other people out there who are two-spirit who are really doing amazing work in that realm. I don't want to take away that attention from them. I want to lift them up. So that is something I have not encountered yet, but yeah, definitely there's, if you look 10 years ago, you couldn't find really any Indigenous MMA fighters. So it's, we're on the rise. So I could see that happening in the next couple of years for sure.
And I think this is our last question. Um, so the person just said that they're struggling with this winter, especially since their surgery, and to get motivated to work out. Um, they really liked that you talked about like aging out of kind of the sports as like a younger individual, and so they don't want to age out of sports, but what's your motivator tip to get started to working out again?
I'm very lucky too. I live with a partner that just he doesn't let me feel sorry for myself too much, even when I want to. Really it's baby steps, it's seeing what you can do. And I was doing it last night, I was starting to feel a little sorry for myself because I still I had a meniscus repair on my left knee. And that one was a doozy. I was in a straight leg brace, so I couldn't bend my leg for about a month. And that was really hard. But one thing I did too, so looking at my wheel, and how I can bring my sport into my wheel, I would go a lot to the practices and I would just watch. And I would watch, and then you get to talk to people and they're like, "Hey, Alana, like, how are you doing?" So you still feel like you're part of the community. I see martial artists sometimes when they get injured, they just don't come to the gym because it makes them too sad. Don't do that. You don't separate yourself. You need that community. So when I was hurt, I would still come to the gym. Not every day. Some days I wasn't up to it, but I still just put myself in that environment and I could like see people moving and like smell the sweat and just being in that environment is really great. So I would say if you have some friends, like maybe you were on a team, just going to the games. Um, I do a lot of physio. I'm very blessed. I do have there's a physio institute out here that does sponsor me. That's really been helpful for me coming in and just doing different things. I've been exploring a lot more mobility work, what I can do to build up my knee so that this doesn't happen again. I'm just doing little walks. So definitely the motivation. Every day I make myself do something because I know that if I don't take care of my physical side, I get very depressed and I get very sad. And I let myself feel my feelings. I was very depressed and very sad the first couple, especially, well, still am, but the first couple weeks after getting injured and having surgery because, I was mourning, the possibilities. And you always think, like, oh, now I'm going to fall further behind. But, I took time off to get my master's, life is rarely a straight line, right? We always have those ebbs and flows. So I would say do what you can and try to put yourself in that community, just try not to isolate yourself. That is something that we do when we're injured and it doesn't benefit us at all. So just trying to get back out there. I hope that helps.
Yeah. And that was our last question. Do you have any last remarks before we end the webinar?
Just thank you all so much for tuning in to listen to me. Yeah, I'm still kind of learning to be an online presenter. I speak from the heart and I stumble over my words sometimes. So I appreciate you all bearing with me. And yeah, always feel free to shoot me a message if you want to get into martial arts but don't know where to start. I am always more than happy to kind of see where you are and recommend some gyms or maybe recommend a certain martial art that might be good for you to start. Yeah, reach out to me. I love to see it. Thank you all so much. Namaste.